Good morning YouTube, it's Sunday morning and as you can see I got set up for the usual weekly broadcast of First Dog on the Moon, and the Outsiders program wasn't proving particularly sparkling because Damien Carrick was standing in, so I deleted the Outsiders halfway through and waited for First Dog on the Moon to appear, and Damien Carrick and his panel of guests talked right through till 1 minute to 10 and then went straight to the news. There was no First Dog on the Moon this week. The First Dog on the Moon is missing in action on the lunar surface. Maybe he doesn't get along with Damien Carrick, maybe they lost the tape, maybe the ABC's legal department has sniffed the wind of change in the island incontinent of Abbotania and decided that they don't want to broadcast anything that annoys the incumbent government in Canberra. Don't know, but yeah, First Dog on the Moon, conspicuous by his absence. Therefore you're left with me giving my impression of the week, and my impression of the week is it was a disastrous week for anybody who understands the concept of a democracy, let alone admires it. Anybody who understands, let alone admires, the Human Rights Convention, the idea of freedom of association, freedom of movement, freedom of speech. It's a bad week, very, very bad week. The Queensland government introduced laws that they're comparable with what was on the books in Romania in 1700 when V.L.A.D the Impaler was running the country. In fact, they called the law the Violent, Lawless, Anti-Social Dispersal Bill or something like that, but it was V.L.A.D, it was the V.L.A.D bill for V.L.A.D the Impaler. And it went through Parliament like, well, not quite like a hot knife through butter, because the Labor Party in Queensland actually succeeded in securing an amendment to the V.L.A.D the Impaler bill to disassemble motorcyclists. The amendment was that the clause which would have required any solicitor or barrister who was walking alongside an outlaw motorcycle gang prescribed member while attending court, you know, walking side by side down the footpath, they had a clause in there that the barrister or solicitor should be arrested and held on remand for up to 3 months while awaiting a sentence of up to 6 years for associating with an outlaw motorcycle gang member. So the Labor Party succeeded in getting that clause removed. That was the only amendment. Mandatory 15 years extra jail sentence for any outlaw motorcycle gang member who is convicted of any indictable offence. Whether they get a jail sentence for the offence or not, they automatically get 15 years on top. If they're an office bearer, they automatically get 25 years. On being arrested and charged with any offence, their motorcycles to be confiscated. If they get convicted of any offence, their motorcycles to be crushed. Against the law for them to wear their colours into any pub or to attend any tattoo parlour, whether or not they own the place. Against the law for any 3 motorcycles to ride in company on the Queen's Highway. Against the law for 4 motorcycles to ride in company. All this jail time to be served in a specially constructed, I don't know whether they've built it yet, prison consisting of nothing but solitary confinement cells where the motorcyclists will be kept for 23 hours a day with no gymnasium privileges, no outside contact except for a non-contact visit once a month. Utterly fucking draconian. The worst thing to hit the legal system since V.L.A.D the Impaler was running Romania. And then the next day, the 31-year-old inexperienced property conveyancer who the Queensland Liberal Nazi Party made their Attorney General because they had much more experienced lawyers and barristers elected to the Parliament who are sitting on the back bench not wanting the job because they know what they're doing and they wouldn't stand still for such crap. That's why they've got an inexperienced property conveyancer making these laws. He decided to take upon himself the right to countermand any judge's orders regarding the sentence of sex offenders, murderers and rapists if the 31-year-old property conveyancer deems that they would be a danger to society. So the principle of innocent until proven guilty, straight out the window. The principle of it's better to see 1,000 guilty people go free than it is to lock up one innocent person out of paranoid, mistaken enthusiasm. That's out the window. Apparently, the clamour of the Chamber of Commerce, who fears that their businesses are failing because the rest of the world is so afraid of Queensland motorcycle gang violence that nobody's turning up for a tourist holiday, that has translated itself into ignorant, stubborn, hubristic politicians who have no constraints by a House of Review to have gone off to consult with the police force on the basis that they think when a police officer charges a suspect, that should guarantee a conviction in court, ka-chink, with a rubber stamp, and then that should guarantee a maximum sentence, ka-chink, with a rubber stamp, because they don't understand the separation of the powers as a doctrine of government. They don't get that. They also don't get the idea of consultation before you enact the legislation to make sure you don't enact a bad legislation or an unconstitutional legislation or an unenforceable legislation. No, they're empire building. They've got the bit firmly between their teeth, and they haven't read or considered enough history to know that all of these ideas have been tried in the past by people like Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini and Joseph Stalin and Pol Pot, Ho Chi Minh, Chairman Mao Zedong. They're being taken to their ultimate logical conclusion at the moment in North Korea. Top-down, rule by decree. They came out the following day with a law so that workers who are injured at work will no longer be allowed to sue the boss for negligence. All right, we're back to pre-Dickensian days where you go to work because you can't afford to live without having 3 casual jobs totalling 60 hours a week just to pay the rent. You can be asked to do anything, and if you get hurt doing it, well, that's tough shit. You should have been more careful, you know. You shouldn't have got your arm caught in the chain of the threshing machine with no cover on it because, you know, a cover would cost money and you can't do anything which costs money. And instead of consulting with the medical industry and the law association or the occupational health and safety industry, sociologists, people who've studied the figures on these things. Oh, no. That would mean consulting with vested interest groups, according to Campbell Newman, the human hemorrhoid. What he's done is he's spoken to the business people who are being forced to pay the premiums on the insurance policies to cover themselves for the unnecessary workers' compensation payments made to workers who injure themselves at work doing what they're told to do by the boss. Like I said, it's been a really, really bad week for people who believe in democracy and human rights because the Nazis have taken over Queensland. My genuine advice to anybody who lives in Queensland is get the fuck out. Otherwise, you're going to stay there and pay taxes to support, and you're going to obey the laws of a completely illegitimate government. A government that is utterly un-Australian. When I think of the country I was educated to believe I was going to live in when I was in primary school, and how the policeman came to the school and took the revolver out of his holster and pulled the bullets out of it and handed it around the classroom so that all the little kids could hold it. And he explained that they were given these things to shoot back at bad people if bad people fired the first shot because it would take him as much paperwork as the weight of the ammunition he fired. If he fired one bullet, he had to submit paperwork that weighed as much as the bullet he fired to explain shooting it. And he explained that they weren't given guns to point at people and force them to obey the law. They were supposed to go out and tell the people, you are under arrest in the name of the fat lady in England. Come on down to the courthouse. I will tell the magistrate what I think you've done. You can tell the magistrate what you think you've done. The magistrate or the judge or the justice will decide which one of us has got the rights of it. And if there is a doubt that I'm wrong, you will be let go. And once upon a time, the working classes had respect for the police. The police weren't paid very much, but they took great pride in not being corrupt. And they didn't need to cover themselves with brightly painted patches of rank and demonstrations of bravery. Those days have apparently gone. So yeah, very sad week. In other matters, Tony Abbott continued to kowtow to the governments in Asia when the Malaysian government issued a proclamation that any Malaysian students who are on a scholarship in Australia would risk the loss of their scholarship if they dared to attend a speech given at an Australian university by Anwar Ibrahim, the Malaysian opposition leader, who was twice been jailed for spurious charges of homosexuality. Instead of telling the Malaysian government to shut up and stay the hell out of Australian education events, a lecture at a university given by a foreign leader of an opposition. No. Tony Abbott's government told the Malaysians that, or told the world in a one-line statement, that all students in Australia have the same political rights as all other students in Australia. So, no support for the Malaysian students. In other news, the bushfire at Springwood in Sydney, which has burned over 200 houses in a single fire. Turns out that on a day of total fireban with absolutely outrageous conditions, the Royal Australian Army was conducting an explosives instruction course. And it was the Royal Australian Army who apparently lit the fire that burnt 200 houses and has caused over 600 insurance claims. That'll keep them safe from terrorism, won't it, eh? Join the army, get your head shot off. Join the army, get your head shot off. Join the army. Light up the fucking cities, man. Newcastle, Sydney and Wollongong, let's burn the fucking lot. Let's go out and play with explosives in the bush on a Total Fireban. And they say arsonists are bad buggers for playing with a cigarette lighter or a box of matches. Join the army, get your head shot off. And of course, poor old Adam Brandt, he got his ass kicked right royally around the media circles because he dared to put up a tweet that said, well, you know, you voted for Tony Abbott, now you got your bushfires, what did you fucking expect? Oh, you can't say that. How can you prove that this one-day event is connected to anything? Yeah, well, it is the middle of spring. We haven't got the summer yet. And already we're burning houses in hundreds of the fucking things per day, in multiple fires, with 2,100 firefighters flat out desperately trying to save things. The only thing we've got right so far this season is that only one person has died, and that was having a heart attack defending his own house. But oh shit no, the media's absolute clamp down on any connection between Tony Abbott's repealing of the carbon tax legislation that he's pushing and pushing and pushing and the bushfires. Not allowed to say in the Australian media that Gay's Revenge has got Tony Abbott's tiny weeny little dick in the gun sights. And on the subject of Tony Abbott's little dick, men who do not have a little dick do not wear budgie smugglers because it's embarrassing at the beach. Men who do have a little dick wear budgie smugglers to prove they've got one, because it's the only instance in which a bulge may be discerned. Once upon a time, the Japanese Navy and Army used to have a dress code which dictated which side a gentleman dressed. The Navy dressed left, the Army dressed right. So if you were on a train in Tokyo in 1940 and you saw somebody wearing military uniform, you didn't have to look at their shoulder epaulets to know whether they were in the Army or the Navy. You could look at their crotch. And whether they were dressing left for the Navy or right for the Army told you which service they were in. But Tony Abbott's got such a tiny little dick in his budgie smugglers, as he's proved to the nation thousands of times on hundreds of occasions. His dick wouldn't reach either leg of his trousers. He's a little centre dick. And I think people with little dicks are a bit like the old adage about never frighten a little man, because he'll later on sneak up behind you and kill you to get even. It's a lifelong overcompensated inferiority complex. He's talked his way into a position of power, and now he's flailing around. And nobody's allowed to say to him that he backed the wrong side of atmospheric chemistry and the wrong side of history 20 odd years ago, when he decided, oh, you know, you can't have climate change. That must be absolute crap, because if that was right, we'd have to change the whole way we run the economy, and you can't change the economy because it's traditional. It's what the Liberal Party's about, is making money. In fact, the environment, you can't change the economy for the sake of the environment. You just got to keep growing the economy because it's the economy, stupid. It's his whole mindset. It's probably not even his fault that he thinks like that. He's been raised to think like that, and he's never been nudged hard enough or far enough out of his groove to have had to rethink anything. But I think personally there is a chain of coincidence between the Liberal Party ramping up its rhetoric on how they're going to repeal the carbon tax, even if it takes a double dissolution to do it, and the army setting fire to 200 fucking houses in Springwood, and then generating ember attacks that lit other bushfires all over the place. I raised my son to be a firefighter to put out fires when things like lightning causes them, or dickheads who are not thinking about their cigarettes causing them. Never occurred to me that I'd be sending him off to Sydney this week, either as probably a strike force commander, or maybe on the remote area firefighting team, to be helicopter inserted in front of the firestorms that the fucking Royal Australian Army has lit in the bush when it was a total fireban. You know, like, he was a kid. He was in the army cadets. I was worried he'd grow up to go to Absurdistan and play hopscotch in the fucking minefield, you know, because Saudi Arabia attacked America, therefore somebody had to go and jump around the mountains of Absurdistan, and I didn't want him to grow up to that. So I got him in the fire brigade cadets, right? Now he's 24 and a brigade captain and a RAF team member and all the rest of it. He's off to Sydney to fight the fucking bushfires that the Royal Australian Army lit. Gaya's revenge. Maybe Tony Abbott will pay attention when they start losing entire suburbs or inland country towns, you know, like, say, the size of Tamworth or Griffith or Dubbo, or when stuff like that starts to happen, Albury-Wodonga perhaps. When is the right side of politics, the neoconservative, laissez-faire free market economists, when are they going to concede the fact that they got it fucking wrong and we should have done something constructive about reducing atmospheric carbon emissions 20 years ago, and then we wouldn't be in this position now? It's why I say the people who voted against the Greens for the last 5 elections, they are the ones to blame. If you've got a flood or a fire or a thunderstorm or a hailstorm or a windstorm or a drought, anything that is outside of statistical normality, if you've got, you know, 4 years in a row where it's the hottest winter ever, yeah, you blame that on the climate science denialists. If you lost your fucking house in Sydney, well, okay, you can blame it on the Royal Australian Army. Join the army, get your head shot off, or we'll light your fucking house up on a hot day. Yeah, so you can feel really proud, you know. I'm sure it'll help on Remembrance Day when you're saluting the fucking invasion of Turkey. So that's what the week's like in Australia, and now we don't even get First Dog on the Moon to talk about it. You just get me ranting on, and I'm tired and cranky and hungover because I got home late last night. But that's a story for another movie. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. First Dog missing in action. Ciao.